Let me ask you a question about one of the things that's emerging over these last several years. Actually, it's been emerging over decades, but really we're seeing something very persistent, is that in the face of the terrible partisanship, the dysfunction in our government, the lack of faith that our government can come up with genuine answers to the devastating, in some cases, circumstances that we're facing, there's a new community of voters that's emerged. Independent voters. 40% of Americans are now choosing not to affiliate with a party. Independent voting just did a survey over the last several months in the midst of the pandemic, asking independent voters a whole range of questions, including why they persist in being independent. Because in some states that means you can't vote in the primaries, and a whole host of other ways and other barriers. What we found, the top two answers were, the number one answer is because I want to vote for the person, not the party. The second most popular answer was the parties are corrupt. So my question to you is to ask you how you see this community of voters as a force to drive political innovation in the country.
What's going to drive political innovation is people from outside the system. So I don't think that, although we work hard to get support from legislators and those in the existing system, and by the way, we're most likely to get support from former elected officials, because then they like to tell the truth about how it was when they were there. But for the same reasons that gridlock is incented now, not telling the truth about how rotten the system is also, you know, sort of one of the things you have to do to currently keep your job. So the innovation starts with people who choose to spend their Sunday night on a call like this, thinking about how things could be different. And then a subset of these people will alter the way they spend their time in the next week, months, and years. And when enough people alter their time to be spending it on these innovations, which is to say, getting Final Five voting on the ballot or getting Final Five voting in front of the state legislature, really, that's how it adds up to that you win and that the system is changed and then that the results are changed. So it's, there's nothing really magic about it in any kind of way. And I think that independent voters have already, it's like I think of it kind of like a funnel. Like first you have to be one of those people that says, yeah, I don't really like this. And then you have to sort of start to say, yeah, and it shouldn't be this way. Not just that I don't like it, but it's wrong. It's wrong that I don't like it and so many of my neighbors don't like it and that our country isn't making the progress. And then you should say, and it doesn't have to be this way. And you keep kind of narrowing down that funnel. And hopefully at some point in that funnel, you come across a solution, which I would propose to be Final Five voting, that you want to invest in, and you become one of the people who changes what you do with your time so that you're moving for, you know, reform. And actually, it's interesting. So I've seen someone in the chat, and I had seen he was on earlier, Mike Otten, and maybe he'll speak up a little bit later. He came to an early presentation that I did with my co-author, Michael Porter, and he got together with several other Harvard Business School alums in the New York area, and they put a group together. They changed how they've spent their time, and they're working towards these innovations in their area. And that's really, you know, where it goes. So I think independent voters are already one or two steps closer to being the ones who are ready to say, not just I don't like it, but it must and can be different.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I think that that's right. I love your funnel analogy. You wake up and you go, wait a minute, what's wrong here and what can I do? And for many people, that first step, it's almost like an act of civil disobedience. They can register outside the system. And I think that that's a starting point.
You know, I think it's so interesting how many of us and how many of our friends and neighbors and family, you know, complain about the system and yet don't actually believe it could ever be different. We kind of think it's sort of meant to be this awful. And yes, democracy is super hard. There's nothing in me that suggests that even what I, advocate for will create some utopia that isn't a challenging situation of, structure of self-government. But it is amazing. A friend of mine calls it learned helplessness. Like we all just think we really have to take these, bad choices year after year after year, and we don't, as you guys know, which is why you're here.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about the book, Katherine, is that I think it does something to impact on that learned helplessness, because it peels the curtains back and says, oh, let's look at this objectively, because I think so many Americans just take for granted that a two-party system equals democracy. And of course, it doesn't have to. And nor do we have to let those two parties run government for their own behalf, on their own behalf.